Hello, hello, friends and frenemies. This is your girl Cersei, and we are here to talk about some Rimworld. You have no idea who I am, and that's totally fine, because what you're going to see today is a collection of about three Rimworld stories that are a decent representation of what you can expect. In our case, we've started solo on the ice sheet. Now, if you've messed with Rimworld before, you may know a solo ice sheet start is one of the hardest things you can do. And, well, as you can see in the quick cut there, we had a brief thought of moving into one of the existing ruins. That is a legit option, definitely a legit strategy, but only if you already have electricity. We have decided to do a tribal start with basically the same kind of basic equipment you would expect to have in a tribal start, except minus the random animals, which honestly is probably a mistake. You can eat them. It's kind of nice to be able to eat them, but we're not going to worry about that today. We're going to just kind of try to make things work regardless. So you can see here that we are building a fairly standard base, making use of the steam geyser, especially on a tribal start where your only means of generating heat is going to be steam geysers and campfires, which I have the starting amount of wood and that is about it. So campfires are not a great idea, but if building your base around a steam geyser is a fantastic way to get started and a great way to manage hypothermia. I'll get into our colonist a little bit later, but Hilda here is a cowgirl. There are a number of mods that are installed right now, and I'll have the full list in the description below. But because of that, Hilda also, in addition, Hilda has the cold inclined trait, which allows her to be a bit more resistant to the temperatures that we'll face out here. Now, obviously, that's still not going to be enough on its own. She could not, say, do some kind of nudist run out here. That would still be suicide, as you can imagine. But that will allow her a little bit of extra resistance. And we can see here the first day is spent mostly just hauling. And now, eventually, we're actually going to build a bit of the structure, so she doesn't have to sleep out on the ice sheet, as it were. Under normal circumstances, especially if you're doing like naked brutality, just sleeping on the ice sheet's gonna kill you. But I have to highlight, I make our first mistake here, and that is equipping the Pila. Never ever do this. Pila is by far the worse than the short bow that you also will start with, and well, we'll go over all of the mistakes in this particular run whenever the time comes, but for now, just know that we've made a grave mistake in doing this. Eventually, at the end of the first night, Hilda does manage to get started on the structure. We are able, thankfully, to... Sorry, this is actually I think this is the second night. Either way, we were able to get that structure, the first part of our structure finished, and that means that she has a warm place to sleep. I'm sure she'll appreciate that. As well, you can see we still have quite a lot of stuff, and as morning comes, there are a few snow hairs on the map. We do finish up our structure, so we can at least kind of protect what little we do have. We're living just off the pemmican we started with. Not great. You can also see Hilda bringing over a table so that she does not get sad about not eating at a table. It's kind of a meme, obviously, but, well, it is the truth. We've got to build a stool, we've got to have a table, or we're going to have a -3 mood buff, basically forever. However, you can see me also making another mistake here, which is that I'm hauling steel and building things when what I should be doing is getting all of our food indoors. I mentioned the snow hares that are around. Normally, those are just food in themselves, and, well, shortly enough, I'm sure they will be. But in the meantime, they are surviving and staying on the map because they are eating our pemmican. Unfortunately, it's not a great trade to keep them alive at the expense of our pemmican. We're going to kill them eventually anyway. They're not particularly food efficient, as it were. But thankfully at this point, I did realize what I was doing, and a trader came by, and I realized yet another mistake. I've not yet moved our silver over, and that means the game does not recognize that we have any, which is unfortunate. That means that we are dealing with, well, not being able to use this trader. He unfortunately has already left due to the nasty conditions on there, and now, of course, I have the wherewithal to tell Hilda to go get our money. So that's unfortunate. Missing out on that first trader doesn't doom us by any measure, but it does mean that, well, things are going to be a little bit harder. You can see one of these damn rabbits, going right at after our pemmican the next day. As I said, that is 100% on me. Food should be your number one priority, especially on the ice sheet, and letting rabbits eat a fairly significant chunk of it. There's one more stack down there that I want to say has about 60 pemmican. We started with about 400. We've been eating over these past 4 days. So maybe not super significant. We'll probably make up the difference once we hunt all of these animals, but nonetheless, every little decision counts when you're on the ice sheet. And, well, it's a clumsy mistake. As we can see now, the hunt has begun, and the Pila is showing us exactly why it's terrible. Specifically, and one of the rabbits is coming to us, just to be extra fun. But, as we saw in that brief hunting segment, the Pila has one of the slowest reloads of a ranged weapon that you're going to find. Or slowest cooldowns, whatever you want to call it. Either way, we are better off trying to fight this rabbit in melee than we are in trying to actually kill it with ranged attacks because of the very nature of the thing. Eventually, we are successful once I realized to tell Hilda to stop running and gunning and instead to just stab the stupid thing. And, well, we have a little bit of food we didn't have before. This one almost certainly chowed down on our pemmican earlier, so it's nice to have that safely put away where we can eat it later. Now, it will take a little bit of time. We don't even have a butcher spot at this point. But that's okay. Hilda is also a little bit beat up. Unfortunately, that rabbit had a little bit of fight in it. The others that she hunts are not so bad. The Pila does have one advantage in that it has the highest damage of the primitive weapons. But that is about it. The next day, you can see we do finally get a butcher table set up, though foolishly we build it out of wood. Likely due to the lack of steel, since we've burned through most of that. And we get a call from another faction that would love to make us pay. Specifically, we're not paying them a dime. We are, as with most ice sheet starts, we are a cannibal, and that means that raids are mostly to our benefit. And, well, as I'm setting up our meal workflow, we get our very first one. One idiot with a knife. This is a pretty standard raid. We are, for the record, playing on Cassandra Classic on Adventure Story, so that is the 3rd difficulty. I'm not one of these blood and dust or losing is fun 500% raid types. Just a personal failure. Nonetheless, we see the Pila really start to show its true character here as we get a single shot off and are immediately engaged in melee. And now, Hilda does have some nice horns. She does have the Pila. You think, she can probably take one idiot with a knife, right? Like that makes sense. It would make sense for her to be able to fight one guy. She can't. No. Unfortunately, Hilda is downed. Now, normally, in Vanilla Rimworld, this would summon the Stranger in Black, a man in black. and he would help you out. For whatever reason, that event did not fire. So instead, we see the first of our Rimworld stories end in a humiliating defeat, as Hilda is kidnapped, and we watch the last walk of shame as she is removed from our colony. Really, quite tragic. Nothing good about that. And so our first story ends. And our second story begins. So, on this second run, we use a very similar setup for our base. Again, making use of the steam geyser, giving it enough, making the room big enough that it is not going to overheat the room. That is a concern. They are quite good at doing that. But we also build our butcher table out of steel, in addition to harvesting another table from a nearby ruin. So even day one, we are in better shape than we were previously. Similarly, I also have the wherewithal to get all of our food indoors as quickly as possible in this case, though her priorities are still a little bit skewed. Fixing the table, hauling in, building materials, all important things, not top priority. You really want to be working manually at this point. You want to be manually hauling each individual piece of food inside. Quick look at her mood shows that she will survive, and we're on to day 2, and, well, as I said, you really want to manually haul that food in. We sure didn't, and that means, well, there's quite a lot on the map that could take it. Day 2 is fairly uneventful. Extremely uneventful, as that cut shows. I'm not even sure why I left that clip in. But you can nonetheless see afterwards we are able to get in the rest of our food. And we start the work. Research is ever so important, though of course I built it out of wood. Research is nonetheless our top priority here, especially right now when we have dwindling food reserves and can only really rely on hunting. In this case, we spawned in a map that had a single Arctic fox and 3 snow hares. So instead of getting to eat 4 animals, we only get to eat 1, as this Arctic fox is taking care of the rest. Not the most efficient use of nutrition, and the short bow does take a little bit to finally finish the thing off. Oh, Hilda, I know you're doing your best. She is. I promise she's doing her best. Nonetheless, after hunting that down, turning it into meat, we can then return to our true work here. As I said, research is absolutely essential on the ice sheet. You need electricity to really do anything beyond subsist on random wild animals and whatever you came with. But we also want to be able to cook this critter immediately. Some would argue you may be better off eating it raw. I'm a little bit of a stickler about this. I do not like eating raw food. I do not like my colonists getting food poisoning and just puking everywhere. And so I go the extra mile, burn a little steel to get a stove ready. We also find a trader and actually have our money this time. So we are able to get a few more days worth of food, 4 packaged survival meals. Certainly can't hurt. In addition, our heat is built up a little too much, and that is why we are now open. We briefly open the front door to allow a little bit of that out. Afterwards, we make a few basic, simple meals, and we get back to mining steel. Arguably, may not be super important right this second. There's not a ton we really need to build, and you can even see we don't even have the storage for it, frankly, but steel is going to be our number 1 resource. I would say if I had the power of hindsight, I would likely deconstruct those steel walls rather than mine it, but I have a project in mind for this steel. Rather than building onto our base, I've decided that we need to get crops in the ground immediately. Now you're thinking, you're on the ice sheet. What crops are you going to place down? 1.3, the ideology update, added fungal gravel to the floor types we can now do. It's super ugly, but it does grant a certain level of fertility. I believe it's about 70%, which is super helpful. Also super helpful, foxes from the sky. But you can see here I've now created a rough, a nutrifungus farm. We are a tunneler ideology, and we'll look at the ideology itself here in a moment. But that means that we love fungus. And, of course, we have our first raid. Just while I'm in the middle of explaining that. Quite rude. Hilda is, of course, completely asleep. But, thankfully, she is certainly able to handle one idiot with a knife, right? I mean, we're not using the Pila this time, so it should be fine. So, I will also mention, we do have the run and gun mod installed. That means that we are able to retreat while firing at the cost of a little bit of movement speed. You'll see that will in fact be less of a great thing. Because while initially we're able to get a few shots off, once we take that first club hit from this guy, we are slowed down. I decide to close to melee. As I said, Hilda is a talented melee combatant with, decent skills and horns. And we then see the tense standoff, and we are eventually, thankfully, able to win it. This means a little bit more meat. For us, always a plus. But she does need to self-tend, as she does take quite a bit of damage. You can now also see, after putting a door here and opening it, that will allow temperature from the campfire to warm up the mushrooms, which they need to grow, while not actually allowing the light that it produces to touch them, which they cannot survive. Now, the downside of attempting to survive on Nutrifungus is that it does take quite a long time, about 10 days to grow. We also spare ourselves one torch, just to speed up research. You can see we're a little bit more put together the next day here as we're getting our old friend, the Raider, put to good use. Similarly, changing around our priorities a little bit. And finally, building a fridge. A fridge on the ice sheet is just as simple as a room with a door facing the outside. We also have been out of storage for quite some time, and so we expand our storage space a little bit. Now, this is where I'm making another mistake, as it would be quite simple to simply round off these corners, save about 20 steel, but it's a minor deal. Ultimately, we have enough steel right now, and we have plenty more on the map, so I'm not too worried about it, and the bases just look so nice with those perfectly square corners, you know? I'm a big fan, in fact. Days pass quite quickly, mostly consumed with research and waiting on our fungus to grow. Though we do have a brief moment of action, as we are able to attempt to hunt a snow hare that's wandered onto the map. Attempt really is the operative word here, as we have to take a little moment to snack before we're finally able to take it out. Food's a little less dire, at least for a little while more. And our fridge is quite full. Sadly, mushrooms again take about 10 days. But that gives us time to finish complex furniture so we can build a bed and get on to the more important project, electricity. As I'm checking on the fungus again, we have our second raid from our extortionists. As you can see, that event that we got earlier, where they attempted to extort some money out of us and we refused, means that we are going to be seeing quite a lot of them. Usually a benefit on a cannibal playthrough. Because, well, it's one idiot with an axe. How bad can it be, right? Hilda's trained her shooting a little bit, thanks to the hunting, but is still not a great shot. She started at 7 shooting, for what it's worth. And I just totally fail to run and gun here. I'm not sure entirely what happened. We hit shooting level 9 just in time to get hit with an axe a whole lot. Eventually, I realized that we just have to close and do our best, and, well, our best is just not quite enough. And so, our second run ends the same way as the first. Really quite a tragedy. However, we're not here to give up today. No, we are here to do our best. And that means a third run. This one moves quite quickly, and we find the ideal starting spot. A steam vent that is near a mountain that we can then burrow into. So, we get our food inside immediately. We're already mining out the actual living space we're going to use. And of course, I finally remember that you can place traps. So we are quite a bit more stable than we were before. Rather than waste time on a second grow spot, we now instead just grow the fungus right in our kitchen. Which really is efficient if you think about it. Of course, the hunt is always on. You can't waste anything on the ice sheet, and that means all of these snow hares will have to come in and be with us. Mining takes priority, but of course, we still always have visitors. In this case, one idiot with a club. Orange. A nice nod to Ambiguous Amphibian. Shout out to Ambiguous Amphibian. He'll never see this video, but he is the inspiration for it. His Rimworld playthroughs are really incredible if you haven't seen them already. But as you can see, this guy is no big deal at all because we finally remembered to bring traps, to build traps. Traps are totally essential, especially when you have a single colonist and their combat stats are not great. As I said, we are at about 7 in shooting and melee. We do take a look. While normally we would want to avoid tainted clothing, we are able to strip and wear his awful cloth hat, which does give us a little bit more protection from the elements. And Orange, sadly, is not long for this world afterwards. We've decided to go with switching to a melee weapon for our raids this time, and that is going to work out quite well. Already, we have another research bench, this time built out of steel. We're ready to go, and that means that the true work can begin. Skipping beds entirely, though I have a little bit of hesitation about it, we go straight for electricity. As I said at some point, electricity is really essential in the ice sheet. We, of course, get extorted, and that means we get to see more raiders. I briefly move our hoopstone ring so we don't stand on the trap to play hoopstone. But this raider is especially dangerous as he's decided to bring a combat handgun. Thankfully, he is also very stupid and decides to go for our butcher table and our hoopstone ring rather than try to do anything else, and that means that we can get him in melee and take care of it. He is rather snazzily dressed, so I would like to actually keep some of his clothing. Let's see how it goes. Riveting Rimworld melee combat. Get it done, Hilda. And she does. Now, unfortunately, we did kill him outright, so we're not going to be able to take any of his clothing, but we now have a combat handgun, and that significantly increases our survivability, among other things. After a few brief moments to repair the damage, move our ring, we, of course, are hunted by a polar bear, because that's what we deserve. I'm really surprised it doesn't go for the corpse here. It's kind of unfortunate, but we are not hopeless. It's just the same polar bear now that it sees that we're outside. Rather than deal with it, we are simply going to go back inside, and wait for our traps to do some work here. I am not eager to tangle with a polar bear at this point. Or really any point. There's never a great time to take your solo colonist against a polar bear. So instead, I set up an area to keep her inside the base, where she can focus on her work. We've made some progress on electricity, as you can see. So she certainly has plenty to do. The next day, while the polar bear is asleep, we sneak the body of our raider back into our base so the polar bear doesn't eat it. And ponder what to do about the giant bear sleeping outside. At the moment, at least, the answer is not much. We also take this chance to get the pemmican out of the steam vent room. Doesn't really matter too much. But then we get a little bit brave, and it's time to try and take out this stupid bear so I don't have to worry about going outside forever. Single shot, 2 shots from our 3 shots, 4! Combat handgun does make us quite a bit more effective. But even in that quick exchange, we managed to get it bleeding, which is what we wanted. It will die in 20 hours or so, but Hilda is in somewhat similar state, dying in 16, thanks to the bite on her right arm. So she's going to take some time to tend herself while we wait for the polar bear to bleed out. Not the most honorable victory, but a victory nonetheless. After a while, some visitors on the map decide to handle the rest of that job for us, and the polar bear is taken care of and quickly added to our food stock. Research continues, and we are able to finally get enough material together to make a pelt coat. This is also a addition from one of our mods, but it allows you to make something that is actually warm and will keep you alive, not quite on the level of a parka, but it allows you to do that with just a crafting spot and without complex clothing. Soon enough, another raid comes, another idiot with a knife. And thanks to our combat handgun, this is not too bad. I also, of course, remember to run and gun at the right time. Absolutely essential if you use this mod. But nonetheless, he is easily taken care of. And the next night, we are able to finish up our pelt coat. Of course, made of human leather, because it is the most abundant material we have at the moment. Arguably, polar bear fur would be a little bit better, but tragically, we don't quite get 80 of it from the polar bear that was taken care of by our visitors. Now, Hilda did start with a duster here. That is because I used prepare carefully, and she happened to generate with that. However, usually most tribal starts will have just tribal wear here, and that is a bit of a problem. Solar flare hits, which thankfully doesn't matter just yet. Flash storm also does not affect us because there is nothing to catch on fire. And we have no power, so no worries on the solar flare either. Now Hilda's definitely working pretty hard. She's got quite a lot of negative moodles, but she finally finishes her coat, and you can see we are a little over halfway to electricity. So her life is, well, close to getting better. Similarly, thanks to the cannibal trait, that human leather pelt coat will do a little bit for her mood as well. We are following the machine school, a custom ideology in this case. It is a collectivist tunneler ideology, just so you know. It does not actually have cannibalism as one of its precepts. Instead, Hilda brought some cannibalism with her. So if we do get second colonists or anything like that, we don't have to be quite as picky. And finally, 10 days pass, and we are able to get our first mushroom harvest. Now, this nutrifungus is intended to be our main source of sustenance, and you can see by the yield that that is actually pretty reasonable. It's very similar to potatoes in terms of what you can expect, except obviously you can grow it underground without sun lamps, which is a huge boon on the ice sheet. We've managed to take a no electricity colony and turn it into a kind of farm. Now, obviously, unless you are a tunneler, you will suffer a mood debuff, but you can see that does not affect us. We love us some fungus. We love us some transhumanism. It'll be quite some time before we can do that, but the first step is electricity, and as we complete that, we go straight onto batteries. Electricity completely changes the game, as I'm sure you can imagine, though it does require us to mine a bit more steel and finally get these walls turned from steel ore into steel walls. We also throw up our first wind turbines. Never a great option for long-term power, but early on especially, a solid way to go. Hilda, thankfully, has a double passion in construction, and that makes that easier. Now we see some man-eating snow hares have decided to come our way. Our tried and true strategy of standing in the doorway and letting them run into our traps is 100% effective, thankfully, though we do take a little bit of damage. Sadly, the Scaria means that we cannot eat these hares. Soon enough, a trader manages to come by, and before they can flee the map, we're able to chase them down and see what they have. In this case, not a whole lot that we can use, tragically. There is another man-hunting pack of squirrels comes to see us. Thankfully, without us really even intervening, they take care of themselves. Though that one wanders around for a while before it decides to do it. And in fact, as Hilda is doing some other work, she is forced to take care of it. Thankfully, she's become quite a good shot at this point. I want to say her shooting is at 9. And so, after rebuilding some traps, we have delicious squirrel meat to work with. And the work continues. Delicious squirrel meat. Delicious squirrel meat. After which, the work continues. We're quite close to getting batteries at this point. Batteries, similar to heating, similar to the power generation, will do quite a lot for us. We are burning our limited supply of wood at the moment to kind of keep things up and running. This is pretty standard in the ice sheet. Wood fire generators are easy to build, fairly low on materials, and as long as you've been careful with your wood thus far, will last quite a long time while you can research batteries and otherwise get your power generation where it needs to be. We finally take some time to clear all of these chunks out of our major living area. It will always be hideous, thanks to the fungal gravel and everything else, but at least they won't slow us down as we go to expand the base and otherwise work in the area. We also allow Hilda a little bit of time to play horseshoes, which I'm sure is a fine distraction from constant research. She is a tunneler, so thankfully she does not have to spend any time outside if she doesn't want to. Well, if she doesn't have to. But that does mean if she goes outside, even for a little while, we do have to worry about a slight negative mood buff. Usually not too bad. Now, I haven't talked a whole lot about Hilda. She is an affectation of mine, a character I'm kind of attached to. But she has 7 in every stat. She has double passions in research and construction. She is just kind of a perfect colonist for this kind of start. And come at me if you wish over that. I, of course, use prepare carefully, because, especially if I'm doing a solo start, ice sheet, tribal, I need every advantage that I can get. If you've seen Ambiguous Amphibian's video on this particular start, he instead starts with 5 colonists, as you usually do on a tribal start, and eats 4 of them. I did consider that. I also considered this quest, which forced weather to just be a fog. That's super easy, especially for this shirt made of Eltex, meaning it's quite a bit higher quality than what we have. Fog is not a big deal at all, so we do end up taking this quest. We also do a little bit of exploring around the map to confirm, indeed, the smallest ancient danger I've ever seen is waiting for us just a little ways from our base. We won't be dealing with this for quite a while, but it's always good to confirm these things. Don't want to accidentally deconstruct a wall and be dealing with it. Then we get a chance for a second colonist. Desperate refugee. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of trust and we don't want to risk the fight, so we do skip it. At least at the moment, a second colonist isn't super essential. We then finally get around to accepting the fog quest, get ourselves a little bit of honor, a shirt, and a trader comes by. Components are the number one thing that we're going to be kind of limited by, and so that is where all of our silver goes. It's not like we have much use for it. Of course, just in time to be extorted, we now have no silver to pay these people, and that means that we are now dealing with more idiots with clubs. They are dealt with much the same way as the previous idiots, thankfully. Hilda is still not quite the crack shot that I would like her to be, but she's doing her best, okay? She's doing her best. And finally, we have batteries. This means we can move on to our ultimate goal is hydroponics, but solar panels really are the best way to go. We are not super high on the locate, and well, then of course I immediately jump to instead getting furniture. I think about it. Ultimately, I land on clothing because parkas are quite worth it. We will need those to survive, and it's cheap. Meaning that we can research it in about a day. Complex clothing is going to be one of the first things you'll want to go for. Similar to furniture. Furniture gets you beds, obviously important. Complex clothing gets you parkas, more important. We sell the shirt, which is one of the more valuable things that we have available. And get a load of medicine for our trouble. Sadly, not quite enough to be able to afford that SMG, as nice as it would be. Then, beds in hand, we go back to solar panels. Solar panels are going to be effective in this case. We are not on the far northern or southern poles of this planet, so that means that they will actually generate the normal amount. Similarly, we take this chance to fit in a tailoring bench. We make ourselves clothing. And then yet another raid comes to see us. In this case, he was stupid enough to come from the south, and that means our poor accuracy is compensated by the efficacy of our traps. Afterwards, while we lack the material to make a toque immediately, kind of known as the ideal cold weather gear, we are able to make a parka, and after a little bit of hunting, we are able to make a flat cap. After looking at some of the other vanilla expanded options, a flat cap is nice because it can be made with leathery material, which is what we really need. We have plenty of human leather and not a lot else. As you can, and that gets us something on our head at least. And we finish solar panels pretty quickly. Now, we have a lot of ways to go from here, but hydroponics makes the most sense. That'll allow us to grow more than just mushrooms. In most cases, you're looking for wealth generation kind of immediately, and hydroponics is the way to go there. Being able to grow things like Insectoid, even smoke leaf, if you really have to. Smoke leaf isn't great for money because you have to grow cotton as well, but it is great for maintaining a colony, as it allows you to control moods quite a lot. Now we get another chance for another colonist, and we are going to take this one. Chile is hopeless, which is unfortunate. That allows us to immediately name our colony. And we check out, we do, of course, need another bed, and otherwise need to take care of Chile, but he will be able to help us out and immediately sets to mining the place. And having a mental break. And becoming a trader. So this is a random chance with this event, but Chile has decided to set our base on fire from the inside, as well as attempt to melee Hilda to death. Chile is not a cowgirl. Chile does not have nice horns, and Chile is not going to win this fight. However, that fire is quite the problem, and until we get rid of him, we can't deal with it. Now, you've seen me make a lot of mistakes in this video. This is definitely the most embarrassing. Setting her to tend without medicine would actually be fine, but of course I think, well, I need medicine, obviously, from my non-life-threatening injuries. I don't think, oh, she's going to have to go get the medicine. And that means she steps on the fire when she's already injured. And now she's on fire, and pawns that are on fire are very stupid. They really can't do much at all. You can't order them to put the fire out or really do anything. They kind of just burn. And they keep burning. And they are now incapacitated and on fire. This is not our proudest moment. This was quite an excellent colony. Really had a chance. You know, I really believed in this one. I ended my recording session and started a second one, thinking, oh good, I've already got a sequel video. But sometimes things just don't go the way you want. Sometimes things are simply lost to fire and ash. But nonetheless, I hope these stories can be useful to you from an educational standpoint. I hope that you can, by witnessing my mistakes, perhaps manage to avoid some of your own. And, well, we'll leave this colony in a glorious flaming blaze. Really, quite the tragedy. Rimworld is a story generator, or so the splash screen tells me. And that means that some stories are going to end like this. In flames. In flames. With that, Hilda's out. I hope you'll join me next time when we're going to try something a little different. But for now, have a nice life.